Version 3 Gala Games nodes are here. Gala recently released a major update to all of their nodes. This update to version 3 nodes is a complete rewrite of the node software, which has some major implications for those running any type of Gala node. The current deadline for updating your nodes is January 18th, 2023. After this date, any node that has not been updated will no longer earn. Note that this applies to all Gala nodes, so not just Gala Games Founders nodes, but also Townstar nodes, Spider Tank nodes, Film nodes, and Music nodes. Version 3 of the Gala node software relies on a third-party app called Docker in order to run. Docker was originally written as a Linux app, but was later ported to both Mac and Windows. But there's a problem here. The Windows version of Docker runs on Windows Desktop, not Windows Server. This creates a huge problem for people who are running their nodes on a Windows Server VPS. This means that this setup is no longer a viable way to run your nodes. So that sucks. Well, now what? Although in the past it was generally easier to run Gala Games nodes on a Windows VPS, the tide has now changed, making it now easier to run your nodes on a Linux VPS instead. I know what some of you are thinking. Linux? How the hell could that be easier? Command line? You've got to be kidding me. What is this? The early 1980s? Fortunately, with detailed instructions, setting up and running a Gala node on Linux is not as hard as it may seem. This video will provide detailed step-by-step instructions for setting up your Gala nodes on a Linux VPS. At the end of the video, I'll also go over some other options for running your nodes if this whole Linux thing isn't for you. Let's get started. In previous videos, I've used the VPS provider PIVPS for hosting nodes. So for this video, I will do the same. With that said, you can pretty much use any Linux VPS provider that you want. In addition to PIVPS, I, and many others, have also used other VPS providers such as Vultr and Contabo. I've provided links to these VPS providers in the description of this video. The instructions for purchasing your VPS service are relatively similar regardless of which service provider you are using. For this video, I'm going to be using PIVPS. So on PIVPS, create an account if you don't have one already. So after creating your account and logging in, select Order New Services from the Services menu. It will most likely default to showing you Windows VPS. So we will just scroll down and find Linux at the bottom of the left navbar. As a reminder, the current requirements to run a Gala node are 4 GB of RAM, 2 CPU cores, and 60 GB of disk space. This corresponds to a number 3 Linux VPS on PIVPS. If you are currently running a number 3 Windows VPS on PIVPS, you'll be happy to note that the Linux VPS is less expensive. Maybe this switch to Linux isn't so bad after all. Once you click Order Now for the number 3 Linux VPS, it's time to choose our operating system. For running Gala nodes, we want Ubuntu 20.04. In this short list on PIVPS, it's pretty easy to identify. However, if you're using a different VPS provider with more options, make sure that you are choosing the 20.04 version of Ubuntu. It's up to you which location you choose to host your node. Note that this location does not necessarily need to be near where you live. Go ahead and continue through the rest of the checkout process. Note that I personally have found PayPal to be the easiest payment method for PIVPS. It may take a little while for your VPS provider to set up your VPS instance. Most will send you an email when this process is complete. Okay, now that we have the email confirmation that our new Linux VPS instance is active, let's start setting it up. Since we're not using Windows, we obviously won't be using Microsoft Remote Desktop to connect to our VPS. So what do we use? You can pretty much use any terminal emulator program that you choose. On Windows, many people use a program called PuTTY. On Mac, you can simply use the built-in terminal app that comes with Mac OS. To launch Terminal on a Mac, First, choose Utilities from the Go menu. Then launch the Terminal app. Okay, now what? In order to log into our Linux VPS, we first need to get its IP address and root password. To do this on PIVPS, you click on the My Services link from the Services menu, and then click on your new VPS instance. If you have more than one, you may want to enter a description first in order to easily identify it. The first thing we need is the IP address of our VPS instance. Go ahead and copy it. Now we go into our Terminal app and type SSH space root, so ROOT, at, and then paste in the IP address. Depending on how you copied the IP address, you may have already picked up a return character. If not, go ahead and hit return. On your first time logging in, your terminal program may give you a warning about the server being an unknown host. Go ahead and type yes to confirm that you want to connect. You will only have to do this the first time you log in, since it will now list your new VPS instance as a known host. Next, it will ask for our password. So let's go back to the website and get that copied. Note that when you paste it into your terminal, it will not actually show the characters. Go ahead and hit return if you haven't already. Okay, so we're logged into our new Linux VPS. Now what? First, we need to get the node install instructions from Gala. To do this, first go to the node dashboard at node.gala.games. From there, click on the download button in the left nav bar. By default, it will show the download page for the operating system that you are currently using to visit the website. But we want Linux. So on the top nav bar, click on Linux. Note that you may need to scroll up in order for the top nav bar to be visible. The instructions on this particular page are very basic and not detailed. In order to get the full instructions, scroll to the bottom of the Linux download page and click the link Install the Gala Node Software v3 on Ubuntu Linux. Now that we have the full instructions, let's go through them. Please note that Gala may occasionally make changes to these instructions over time, so please be sure to follow the instructions from Gala if they happen to be different than what is shown in this video. Before installing the node, we need to make sure our Linux software is up to date. So the first command we need to copy and paste from the instructions is this one that says sudo needs restart mode, etc. Please note that depending on how you do your copying and pasting, you may or may not pick up the return/enter symbol at the end of the line. If you did not, go ahead and hit return now. And now we have tons of text whizzing by. Depending on the VPS configuration, this process could take a while. Don't worry, I'm not going to make you watch it all in real time. Depending on the VPS configuration, you may get some type of pop-up like this one. If you do, go ahead and accept the default option by hitting return or enter. Phew! Finally done. Don't worry, the remaining steps shouldn't run nearly as long. Now, if you remember from earlier, version 3 nodes need the application Docker in order to run. So let's get that installed. The command line for this is sudo apt install docker.io-y. Now, with Docker installed, we need to verify that it's running. To do this, go ahead and copy and paste this command here for the status. Remember, you don't actually need to type all of this, but can simply copy and paste from the instructions. We now see the Docker status. It looks like it's running, so to get out of status mode, we just press Q. If for some reason it's not running, then paste in this command to enable it. Now that our Linux is up to date and our Docker software is running, it's time to download the node software. To do that, go ahead and copy and paste this command starting with sudo wget. Before we install the software, it needs to be extracted. Depending on what the current version of the node software is, this may be a two-part copy-paste job. First, we need to copy the first part of the command from the instructions, sudo tar xzvf. Be sure you get the space after the F. Then, in order to make sure we're extracting a correct file, let's copy the file name that Linux is telling us we just downloaded. In this case, it's gala-node-v3.1.10 node.tar.gz. But please note that Gala releases new versions of the Node software all the time, including in the middle of while I was filming this video. So yours will probably be a different version. So once we've got the full command line in there, it should look something along the lines of sudo tar blah 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 Gala node version 3 point whatever .gz. All right, let's get this thing installed. Now this is where you need to be very careful with your copying and pasting. When copying the command sudo gala node install.sh, make sure that you do not accidentally copy the invisible return character. Otherwise, that may screw things up. This is because once you put in the command, it will ask you to accept the license agreement by typing a capital Y. If you accidentally copied the return character, it will pick that up and say, hey, that's not a capital Y. Fail. So let's go ahead and put that in command line and then do our Shift Y. All right, your node is installed, but we're not done yet. We still need to configure it and get it running. One of the things that is different about setting up your new version 3 node is the way you log in. Rather than manually entering your username and password, we will use what's called an API key. Okay, so how do we get that? To get your API key, we need to go back to the node dashboard at node.gala.games. From here, we click on API key in the left nav bar. Now we click on the Generate API Key button. Go ahead and name the API key something that is meaningful to you and click Create. Note that if you're running multiple nodes, it's probably best to create a new API key for each node. Now that we have our API key, let's get it configured in our node. To do that, go back to the instructions and copy-paste the command sudo gala node config API key followed by a space. Then go back to the API key page of the node dashboard and click the copy button next to the API key we want to use and paste that in as the rest of the command. Gala's come a long way from when Founders nodes were the only nodes. Now, there are also Townstar nodes, Spider Tank nodes, Film nodes, Music nodes, and who knows what else by the time you see this video. Given this, we need to configure our node to tell it which of the node workloads we want it to run. But first, let's check which type of nodes you have licenses for. To do that, copy and paste the command sudo gala node licenses. In this case, we have the workloads Player, Founders, Spider Tanks, Film, and Townstar. Note that Player is the music node and is short for music player. In the future, once the various nodes start doing some heavy lifting, you may want to only run specific workloads on a specific node. For now, though, it probably makes sense to run all of your available workloads. So let's go ahead and do that by sudo gala node config workloads, and then the workloads you want to run. For this example, the full command would be sudo gala node config workloads, Film, Townstar, Founders, Spider Tanks, Player. Note that there should be a space in between each workload and no commas. All right, we've told it which workloads, so now we're finally ready to start our new node. Sudo gala node start. It looks like our node is running. But how do we know for sure? There's two ways to check. First, let's check on Linux itself using the command line sudo gala node status. Looks like the node is still starting up. See how it says it's creating containers? Well, while we're waiting for it to fully start up, let's go ahead and rename the node so we can more easily identify it on the node dashboard. To do this, we use the command sudo gala node rename, and then a space, and then whatever you want to call your node. The node should be up and running by now, so let's go ahead and check its status again. So once again, sudo gala node status, and it's running. Huzzah! But not so fast. Just because it says it's running doesn't necessarily mean it's correctly showing up as part of the Gala node network. To verify that, we need to go back to the node dashboard. Well, it's showing up, so that's good, but it's still in the red. We need to make sure it's green and fully running properly. So we wait. This could take like 10 minutes or so. 10 minutes later. And there it is. It's all green. All right, you've installed your version 3 node. You did install your version 3 node, right? Well, if you don't want to deal with all of this, there are other options. Probably the easiest option is to have NerdNode host your nodes for you. NerdNode is a node hosting service that will run all your Gala Games nodes for you, and some other types of nodes as well. For a reasonable fee, they will keep your node up and running and will do all the version updates for you as well. They even have a guarantee that if your node goes offline due to something NerdNode did, they will pay for any node distributions that you missed. This, of course, does not apply if Gala does something that knocks all the nodes offline for an extended period of time. I've put a link in the description to schedule an onboarding appointment with NerdNode if you're interested. Whether you set up your node using this video, having NerdNode get it up and running, or running it some other way, remember that you need to have your nodes running version 3 by January 18th, 2023, or they will no longer earn rewards. Questions? Let me know in the comments below. Please hit like and subscribe, and I'll see you next time.